Hey everybody, and welcome to DnD Horror Stories with DnD Doge. In today's video, we have a story about a dungeon master that gets caught cheating by modifying the player's character sheet. A story about a player's first time experience with a Dungeons & Dragons murder hobo, and much more. But before we get into those, let's meditate with Simba to help protect us from the psychic damage that these stories are sure to induce. Ah, there we go. Now I think we are ready for some D&D horror stories. Anyone have a game master that insists on holding onto everybody's sheets and uses it to cheat? By Reddit user World Gone Away. I was talking to a friend of mine that I haven't played games with in years. While we were catching up, he out of the blue asked me a question. Hey, whatever happened to Jordy? It brought back some horrible memories. My friend and I joined some of this guy's games because he was about the only person willing to run them back when D&D 3.0 came out. Most of the players that were regulars in his games said that he was a, quote, tough DM. But through our experience, we found out he was a cheating bastard. He was the kind of guy that delighted in putting player characters in bad positions that would either get them killed, tortured, or really cause great dissatisfaction for the players. He had pretty much conditioned his 3 regulars to accept that this is how you were supposed to play D&D, but my friend and I weren't too sure. One of his gimmicks was that he, quote, didn't trust the players not to fudge their sheets. So his solution was that he would watch you roll stats after you pitched a character concept to him, let you set up your character sheet for about an hour, and then he would insist that you give it to him, and he would manually transcribe it. He would hold on to his own handwritten copy, and let you keep the other one, and he would compare them at the end of a session. And it was very odd that he used to always find something wrong, and mandate that you make adjustments at the end of every session. This group never seemed to get to 10th level, because the guy really loved TPKs. And finally, my friend ended up pointing out during a game that it looked like Jordy had actually doctored his sheet overnight to diminish some of his combat capabilities and saving throws. He flatly denied it, but for that whole session, all of the monsters took special attention to him, and he was the first one to go down during that TPK. My friend decided that he didn't want to come back after that. Afterward, Jordy rather condescendingly told me that he didn't think I was, quote, mature enough to be playing with that group, and said that I had better go find a different game to play in. I asked him if I could try just one more time, and he just contemptuously said that he'd give me one more shot. So I made a kobold sorcerer. I pitched this to him, rolled stats with him, and when he approved everything, he hand-wrote a copy, gave me back my original, and said that we would be playing the following Saturday. Then I went downstairs to the local game store and asked a good friend of mine working there if he could photocopy my sheet for me. He did, and I asked him if it would be okay if I left another copy with him so I could compare it. He said it was, and I got ready to head home. Immediately during the session the following weekend, Jordy became aware of the fact that the way I had built the character, their starting AC was 20. For the first half of the first session, most of the monsters could not hit me, being largely level 1 and all. Magically, about halfway through the first session, maybe an hour and a half, I started getting hit very often. I asked him at one point in time how they were so easily able to hit, even though they were mostly the same monsters as before. His excuse was, of course, bad luck, but I implored to find out the bonuses, which he wouldn't tell me. Finally, he rolled his eyes and said, I don't know why any of this surprises you. Your AC is only 16. So, of course, I smiled and told him that he was mistaken. He was probably forgetting my dex bonus, or the fact that I was wearing a chain shirt because of the good max dex and arcane spell failure percentage. He then said, "You don't have a chain shirt, and you can't wear one. I don't know where you got that idea." So we pulled out the player's handbook and showed him, and I explained that I was able to get it with the starting gold that he gave me. He demanded to see my sheet, and then he laughed to himself, saying, "So, I guess we know who's cheating. You don't have one according to the sheet I have." So I laughed and pulled out the photocopy and put it on the table so all of the other players could see. I explained that there was a second photocopy that I produced immediately after character creation the previous week, and if they doubted it, they could ask the game store clerk downstairs, who made the copy for me. One of Jordy's friends leaned over and peeked at his copy of my sheet and said, "Yeah man, looks kinda like you erased it." And then he kind of threw a temper tantrum. He picked up one of the books and threw it at me from across the table and screamed something to the effect of, "Rocks fall, everyone dies," and demanded that I leave and not come back. Going back to the beginning of the story, I told my friend that I didn't know. I hadn't seen him since then, and I didn't really want to go looking for him either. He's not the first person like that I played with. He definitely wasn't the last, but he was probably one of the most obnoxious. If he had problems with the way people actually wrote their sheets, or wanted to remedy something that they felt was a shortcoming, he could have just talked to the players. But that's not what he was doing. He was just being a dick. Now, it's not uncommon for a dungeon master to have a copy of their players' character sheets to reference them when they need to, especially today, with a lot of games being online in platforms like Roll20. But it was pretty obvious that that wasn't why this dungeon master wanted these copies for, if after every session he, quote, found discrepancies on a player's sheet is any indication. It was pretty clear that this dungeon master had a DM versus player mentality, and OP was pretty clever in having the store owner make a photocopy of his sheet right after creating it. Then, when confronted about changing things on his copy of OP's sheet, with one of the players even stating that it looked like the dungeon master erased the chain shirt from OP's sheet, the dungeon master, of course, acted like a child, killed the party, and banned OP from his game, in which I would say that was no big loss. Plus, then the rest of his players probably realized what he was doing, and I wonder if they continued playing with him as a dungeon master. Now, OP did state that this wasn't the first or last DM or player that he encountered that could be considered a D&D horror story, and in fact, posted another one involving inviting a problem player to a game that he was running. So let's take a look at that one. Two more was too many, and we need a screening process. By Reddit user, World Gone Away. Alright, this one is gonna be long. It's my second one, and the more recent example I have. It was an annoying process, which I took entirely too long to remedy, and I really didn't handle it as well as I could have. Had I acted sooner, my group may have avoided the drama that unfolded. Let me begin by explaining the group. I'm not going to use anybody's actual names, and I won't be using people's character names to avoid confusion. We were playing D&D 3.5, and I started the group as part of a Halloween-themed adventure in Castle Ravenloft. The game had cleared the main module, and within a year, had elevated to a multiversal exploration. The group changed a few times during this, but finally settled into a core group of 4 key players. My friend Leo was an Orc Paladin. My wife was a Henge Yokai Oracle. My buddy Zed was a human fighter, and Zed's friend Mac was a human sorcerer. Leo was a longtime friend of mine, and has been in so many of my games since 2nd edition, and Zed had never played a tabletop RPG before in his life. The group worked out remarkably well, and we had a pretty good thing going. By the time the party was about level 11, my wife told me that her cousin had expressed an interest in playing D&D. She had a basic grasp of the rules, and was looking for a group to play with. I really didn't think that we had the room for another player in the group dynamic, but I asked my wife if she thought her cousin was a good fit, and she said that she was. She came over on the next game night, and I helped her with her character, while the rest of the party spent the session recapping and doing some shopping in town. This girl also brought her boyfriend along. Give me a minute to describe this girl. She was 19 years old, very friendly and bubbly, but she suffered from mild autism. Not a problem, because my wife and I are both high-functioning autistics ourselves. But while we taught ourselves strategies for dealing with it, and educated ourselves on social cues, this girl had grown up never needing to deal with it. She clearly couldn't read people's body language, loved gory horror movies, had weird sexual proclivities, and didn't understand when it was and wasn't appropriate to talk about them in mixed company. I'm going to call her Kathy for the purposes of the story. Kathy's boyfriend wasn't bad. He didn't have any experience playing the game, but he was mild and quite a bit more grounded than his girlfriend. He was a little weird, but all of us were weird too. I'm going to call him Dion. Kathy was a Moon Elf Ranger, and Dion was a Draconian Sorcerer. For the sake of time and space, I'm going to list some of the weird stuff that Kathy frequently did to derail roleplay sessions. And warning, it's very NSFW. Stopped a funeral procession to harvest the lungs from the to-be-interred corpse. Removed the kidneys from a gnome shopkeeper she killed because he refused to sell her an item. Fed the kidneys to the gnome's wife and daughter. Set a building on fire because a child inside was unsettled by her. Castrated an orc after a combat session and made jerky with the genitals. Made every attempt to feed said jerky to every NPC she encountered. Explained in detail why she was naked and didn't have anything in her inventory apart from a knife and apparently testicle jerky. Tried to seduce a lich in the middle of combat. Asked to borrow 5,000 gold from a party member to buy a known cursed item from an NPC, and did not take no for an answer. Tried pushing Zed's character into a deadly clockwork machine because she thought it would be funny. Disengaged from a boss fight to have sex with a charmed dragon, and made finger puppets from a couple of pixies. This was all in one session. She even did a whole bunch of strange things in real life that bordered on violating other players' personal space. So I keep telling her that the behavior is inappropriate, and I keep telling her to tone it back because she was interrupting people and making them uncomfortable. She just seemed to, quote, shut off every time I told her, and she would back off but didn't acknowledge, only to re-offend again. Even her boyfriend tried reeling her in. It's worth noting, my wife had a family function the next day, so she left the game early to go to bed, so she only saw about a quarter of what she did. Leo texted me the next day, expressing that Kathy made him very uncomfortable, and he asked if I could take her aside before the next session, and explained that the behavior was making him and Mac uncomfortable. Almost at the same time, I got a text from Mac saying basically the same thing, so I decided to call her and try to communicate this as soon as possible. She didn't seem receptive, but she said she understood. The next week, Kathy and Dion show up, and we all get settled into play. My wife didn't play because she had to work, and what follows is the ensuing list of shenanigans. She punched an NPC trying to keep her from throwing one of Zed's swords into a portal. Suggested we harvest the stomach of the NPC after they were killed by the monster that came out of said portal. Tried to seduce said monster. Tried punching Leo when he tried to stop her from stealing another sword from Zed. Tried to seduce Zed's character. Defecated on the NPC's corpse when Zed refused the advance. And was punched by Mac's character to stop her from trying to steal Leo's sword that he was holding. Now, the whole time, Dion, Mac, and I are chiding her for all of this, and it just kept falling on deaf ears. We only got about halfway done of what I set out to do that session, and I ended it almost 2 hours early. After everyone left, I got more text from the other players about this girl's behavior. I replied that I tried my best, but wasn't getting through to her. I decided that I would try to get my wife to help. Maybe she'd listen to her. That didn't go well at all. When I explained everyone's concerns to my wife, she got mad and said that Kathy was texting her all morning about how, quote, uncomfortable the other players were making her, and that we were bullies for it and should be ashamed of ourselves. Sparing a lot of details, my wife and I actually had a huge fight about this, but eventually, cooler heads prevailed, and she agreed to stay in for all of next session. This is pretty much how that session unfolded. Kathy's character tried to feed the remaining orc jerky to all of the party members. Had a loopy fit where in character she said the word penis 73 times. I was counting. Made creepy Hannibal Lecter noises to an NPC while telling them she was going to take their skeleton when they inevitably died. Spent almost 20 minutes pleading with me to let her swap 2 of her character's levels for Sorcerer so that she could use some of the same spells that Mac was using. Tried to stab an NPC for not knowing where the closest tavern was. It was Leo that asked, not her. Stalked a tiefling through town because she wanted to, quote, make jerky out of him in broad daylight. Tried to make a shrine from body parts she collected in a pew in a temple in the middle of a service, and defecated on the altar when approached by the town guards. It was at this time that my wife had seen enough to know who was really making who uncomfortable. We took a recess, and Kathy, my wife, and I all went outside, and my wife explained to her in very firm terms that she wasn't playing the game as anything other than a weird fetishy horror movie, of which no one else wanted to be a part of. Kathy didn't agree, but said she understood. The conversation lasted almost a half hour, and by the end of it, I tried, in my most polite way, to disinvite her from the game. It killed that particular session, but neither Kathy nor Dion came back to any ones in the future. It must be noted that with 5 to 6 players in these sessions, with this level of disruption, we were not able to get anywhere near enough actual playtime, as we were wasting time on these shenanigans. I almost think that if the group was a little bit smaller, I could have cut the head off of this a little bit earlier, but it didn't work out that way. Fortunately, I still see Kathy at my wife's family events, and there is not any bad blood between us, but it really did sour me. So I told my wife that 2 more was too many, and we need a screening process. Well, I would say that Kathy was your textbook murder hobo, if I have ever heard one. With that list of what she would do in the game, I can understand why the other players would get annoyed and uncomfortable with her. It is in these cases where the Dungeon Master should just put their foot down and say no to certain things if a player is derailing things or just throwing chaos into the game, especially if it's hurting the enjoyment of the game for the others involved. At least OP stated that he knows he should have done something sooner and has learned from that experience, to the point of putting a better screening process in place when it comes to new players joining any games he runs. And it is good to hear that there is no bad blood between OP and Kathy, though I would be very wary of any beef jerky that she would offer. Let's move on. Is my teammate a psychopath? By Reddit user IJustWaluigi. After a long break, I started to play D&D because one of my friends was starting a campaign. The party consisted of me, a paladin dragonborn who can speak to animals, a classical barbarian, a small but nifty artificer, and a wizard who was the main issue. Let's call him Patrick. So in the first session, everything was peaceful, and we started to know more about the world building and the plot. But as soon as we stepped into a village, Patrick thought it was a great idea to kill the sheep that I was talking with, because the sheep was, quote, mocking him, because she was saying, "Bah." I had to body shield the sheep so he wouldn't kill her, and after that, the sheep's owner even gave me a special scroll that will help me in the future. When we stepped into a city, Patrick saw a golden statue, and he had the fantastic idea to steal said statue, or at least a piece of it, because he, quote, needed the money. The statue's owner was furious, and I had to de-escalate the situation and pay the owner with a favor. The Dungeon Master gave us complete freedom, but criticized Patrick's actions, and Patrick got mad and complained in the group chat the day after. During the last session, we were in a fortress, and the guards took our weapons for security reasons, and Patrick randomly decided to attack them, and after killing one of the guards, he asked the DM to, quote, wear his skin and his clothes. The Dungeon Master was flabbergasted, but allowed him to do it after a check. The guard stopped him and captured all of us. Their leader came to punish all of us, but Patrick said, I will sacrifice myself for the party. He was then executed, and the rest of the party now needs to pay back the fortress for all the damages. He caused more harm than good. After the session, Patrick quit the campaign because he said, everyone is against what I do. I have no freedom. I hate this character. And now he quit the group chat after a discussion, and the poor Dungeon Master had to deal with him in private. The question is, why was he like this? It sounds to me like OP had their first run-in with a murderhobo that guy. And as far as why he was like that, who knows? I think some people just see the freedom that comes with tabletop RPGs as a way to do whatever weird things they want to do, without considering how it could impact the game for the other players. Kinda like they want to play fantasy Grand Theft Auto or something. But at least it sounds like OP doesn't have to deal with this player anymore, as they showed themselves the door by just up and leaving. And hopefully, this will be the first and last time OP ever has to encounter a murder hobo. And by the looks of it, we have time for one more story, so let's get into it. DMs, let your players be good at things. By Reddit user, AltRocker. This is an old story from the mid-2010s, but I was reminded of it recently, so decided to share. I was playing D&D 5th edition when it was still slightly fresher of a game. I made a bard, since it's always been a favorite class of mine, and naturally maxed out charisma, and took expertise in persuasion and deception, the whole shebang. It was the most basic overall bard build you could imagine. No gimmicks, no tricks, etc. Dungeon Master, however, started to notice that expertise in charisma skills on a charisma class means I tended to roll well on persuasion. This meant my ability to work our team through social encounters was fairly high, and he decided that was actually bad. I noticed that he stopped letting me ever roll for persuasion. He would always either just have the NPC stonewall my speaking, which is fine to do in general. Obviously, not every NPC can be swayed, even by a nat 20. Or I would notice he intentionally would wait for the exact moment anyone else in the party spoke up to ask them to roll. One session, I made an offhand joke about persuasion basically becoming useless to me since I never get to roll it anymore. And the DM said completely straight-faced, yeah, why would I let you roll? Your bonus is so high, you basically can't fail. So why give you the ability to anyways? I can't let you be good at it. Me. But that's what I built my bard to do. Dungeon Master. Sorry, but I'm not letting you roll persuasion still. I didn't want to make any more of a fuss, but I do to this day believe that this is not a good mindset to DM with. While yes, obviously, you should challenge players, and not exclusively play into their strengths. Targeting a weakness is something that should happen too, but let your players actually do what they were built to do. Yeah, that is a bit BS for a dungeon master to do. Different builds are supposed to be good at certain things, and that's what makes a good party for the game. To not give OP opportunities to do the things that they were good at would be like taking sneak attack away from a rogue player. Like OP said, still put players in situations that they are not good at, but don't take away situations that they would be good at, because that kinda sucks the fun out of the game. I'd say that the moment that the Dungeon Master stated flatly that he wasn't going to let OP roll any persuasion checks, that would have been the moment I would call that out and leave that game. Though, what would you guys have done if you were in OP shoes here? But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, especially the ones who like the video and leave a comment, and may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.